Hey guys, tonight we're stepping quietly, humbly, and with the right sandal first into a glittering Persian banquet that's more about politics than pudding. Imagine golden incense burners puffing scented smoke through halls draped in embroidered tapestries. You're blinking in the lamplight, adjusting to a room where even the spoons probably outrank you. And this is only the waiting area. That's right. You haven't even earned the right to nibble on a date yet. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love to know where you're tuning in from and what time it is. There, drop your location and local hour in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're clutching what feels like a scroll, but is actually an invitation unrolled on hammered leather, inked in indigo, and sealed with a lump of something that might be lapis lazuli or just fancy wax. The scribe who delivered it didn't make eye contact, which means either deep respect or you've done something vaguely treasonous. The invitation reads like poetry, but functions more like a warning. Arrive with humility. Do not outshine. Bathe beforehand. You do all three, though the bathing part involved some mild flooding in your cousin's garden because you broke the clay tub mid-splash. Historians still argue whether these banquets were weekly affairs or reserved for rare, politically motivated spectacles. Some scrolls suggest they happened to honor victories or harvests. Others say they were a frequent calculated flex of power. But one thing's certain, if your name's on the guest list, you're being watched closely. Now you approach the palace. Not a metaphor, an actual palace. The walls are made of polished stone and decorated with carved reliefs showing soldiers, priests, and a suspicious number of cows. You squint at one frieze and realize the cow is being offered a cup of wine. So, maybe it's that kind of party. A line has already formed. Everyone stands 2 paces apart. That's not politeness, it's a regulation. An official with a 6-foot measuring stick corrects spacing like it's an Olympic event. You take your place behind a man with a velvet sash and a parrot on his shoulder. The parrot sneezes. You pretend not to hear. You inch forward under an archway of cypress branches woven with silver threads. The scent is heady, like someone set fire to a perfume shop. A boy with a shaved head and a gold earring hands you a feather to fan yourself with. You wave it vaguely and immediately smack yourself in the nose. The boy doesn't flinch. He's clearly seen worse. At the threshold, a scribe scribbles your name into a clay tablet. You try to peek at the names above yours, but the tablet is tilted just out of view. Classic banquet secrecy. You're handed a token, a small ivory disc etched with a lotus. You hold it like a coin and nod, even though you have absolutely no idea what it means. Later, you'll learn that it dictates your seat, your food tier, and whether you get a backup cushion if your first one deflates. Just inside the main hall, a statue of Cyrus the Great greets you well, more like looms over you. You nod at him too, just in case. Everyone seems to be nodding. No one speaks above a whisper. The air is saturated with sandalwood and roasted barley and oddly goose feathers. Then comes the real moment, the presentation of gifts. Oh yes, you thought just showing up was enough. Think again. Every guest must offer a token to the host. Something symbolic, something humble, something not cursed. You have brought a small carved fish from the Caspian coast. It's rumored to bring luck, or indigestion depending on how it's positioned. You kneel before the grand steward who inspects your gift with the enthusiasm of a man who's already cataloged 67 similar trinkets. Still, he nods once. Approval granted. You are escorted, lightly gripped at the elbow, into the great hall itself. And there it is. A room so wide your voice would echo for 5 minutes if anyone were foolish enough to test that theory. Pillars stretch skyward like frozen bolts of lightning. Tapestries drip with gold thread portraying royal hunts' mythical beasts, and at least one flaming chariot that seems historically suspicious. On every side, rows of people lounge or perch, some rigidly upright, some nearly horizontal depending on their rank, sobriety, and flexibility. At the far end, half shrouded in purple gauze and guarded by spearmen in patterned cloaks, sits the king. He isn't eating. He isn't moving. He is simply watching. You. Your guide gestures subtly. Your spot is mid-tier, not on the floor, but not quite within chicken leg throwing distance of royalty either. You settle into your space trying to look relaxed, but not too relaxed. The wrong posture might imply arrogance, or worse, indigestion. You glance around. Most guests wear long flowing robes dyed in rich indigos and dull crimsons. Jewelry glints on wrists, ears, ankles, and even toes. You spot one noble with a tiny spoon dangling from his necklace. Bold. Either he's very hungry or very fashion-forward. A servant glides past holding a tray of dates studded with pistachios. You reach for one and freeze. No one else is eating yet, not even chewing. You retract your hand and pretend to scratch your chin. Smooth. Maybe. Somewhere nearby, a musician plucks a slow, wandering melody on a saunter. It sounds like someone sighing into velvet. The room shifts slightly, like everyone's exhaling at once, then a sudden hush. A gong sounds. The king has raised his hand. And just like that, the banquet has officially begun. You are now inside the belly of ceremony, a Persian banquet. Yes, but also a test. And your first exam, footwear. That's right. You can't just stomp into luxury dragging dirt from the outer world. As a servant slinks past with a tray of cinnamon-infused honey cakes, you notice a small side alcove curtained with woven reeds. Your guide gives you a look, one of those if you have to ask your already failing glances. You shuffle over and find yourself among a cluster of guests bent double, undoing their sandals with the solemnity of priests disarming sacred relics. The custom here isn't just practical, it's psychological. Removing your shoes is symbolic. You're leaving the outside behind. Politics, grudges, tax debates, poof. Gone, or at least temporarily shelved. Also, the king's floors are rumored to be inlaid with ancient Mesopotamian tiles, and scratching one might get you politely exiled to the far provinces. Forever. You ease out of your sandals. They're not fancy. One of them still has dried fig stuck to the strap. You try to casually brush it off with your elbow, nearly tipping over in the process. Behind you, a merchant wearing embroidered socks snickers under his breath. Great start. With bare feet now absorbing the cool tile, you step into the deeper layers of the banquet. There's a hush here, a breathable reverence. You catch the smell of saffron and citrus oil wafting through the air like it's been painted there. The floors give ever so slightly beneath your soles, padded by rugs that likely cost more than your entire camel herd back home. Not that you have a camel herd. You once borrowed one and it bit your cousin. Anyway, etiquette now demands that you shrink a little, not physically though, with all the bowing you're getting there. The act of entering barefoot is more than hygiene. It's hierarchy. You're meant to feel small in the presence of greatness, to remember your place in this silk and cinnamon food court of power. Humility isn't optional here. It's mandatory. A steward in a crimson robe approaches and eyes you from head to toe. He looks like he's deciding whether you're worthy of salted almonds or just decorative dates. He says nothing but raises one perfectly threaded brow. You bow. Not too deep, no face planting. That's a faux pas, especially after the sandal incident. You hold the bow just long enough for your lower back to regret being alive, then straighten. The steward gives a faint nod and gestures to a shallow basin set into the wall. Inside, a gentle stream of rose water flows over smooth pebbles. You're to wash your hands again, more for symbolism than sanitation. There are rumors of a guest once using soap and being stared at so coldly that he allegedly became a hermit in the Zagros Mountains. Historians still argue whether this tale is real or an elaborate metaphor for overachieving dinner guests. You dip your hands in the rose water. It smells expensive and slightly dizzying. A soft cloth is offered. You dab, not scrub. Scrubbing implies grime. Dabbing implies mystery. And in ancient Persia, mysterious guests fare far better than grimy ones. Another guide now offers you a thin shawl linen, pale scented with a touch of frankincense. You drape it loosely over your shoulder, though no one tells you why. It's just done. If you ask questions, someone might quote Zoroastrian allegory at you, and no one wants that before hors d'oeuvres. You return to your cushion and notice something alarming. The woman to your right has adjusted hers. She's shifted it slightly toward the center, gaining maybe an inch of space. That inch could mean the difference between respected merchant class and possible low-level bureaucrat. You eye your own cushion. Dare you nudge it? Before you can act, a group of latecomers enters. This is your chance to watch and learn. One man removes his sandals with exaggerated grace, then bows so low, his forehead grazes the tiles, a bit much. Another glides in barefoot but forgets to wash his hands. Three stewards converge on him like hawks and gently but firmly redirect him toward the rosewater. You feel your ego shrinking in all the right ways. Every move here is curated, slow, mindful. You start to appreciate the quiet discipline of it all. No one is talking over one another. No one stabbing meat with skewers or double-dipping figs. The quiet hum of formality is oddly calming, like a temple that occasionally serves lentils. The king still hasn't eaten. He remains motionless behind his gauzy veil, flanked by guards whose armor glints just enough to remind you of your mortality. It's said that no guest may taste food before the king takes his first bite, not because he's hungry, but because he is order. He chews. Therefore, the world turns. You settle in deeper, careful not to recline fully. Reclining too far implies arrogance. Sitting too upright implies anxiety. The goal is modestly poised, a phrase that has no exact definition, and yet everyone seems to understand. There's a soft clang as metal dishes are arranged near the dais. You glimpse slivers of golden bread, circular dates, and something you pray is cheese. The air grows thicker, not just with spice, but anticipation. Even your breathing slows to match the unspoken rhythm of the room. And just as your stomach sends a diplomatic gurgle, the king moves. It's minor, a flick of his index finger, but it's enough. Servers begin moving again. The music, which had paused for the solemn entry, resumes with delicate strings and soft drum taps. The first course is on its way. But before the first bite, you must endure one more round of ritual. You sigh quietly, shoes off, pride tucked. You've survived the etiquette of entry. Now you just have to make it through dinner. You're seated barefoot and appropriately small on a modestly firm cushion. Neither too plush, which might imply hubris, nor too thin, which might suggest you've offended someone important. Congratulations! You have passed the unspoken seating gauntlet of the Persian banquet. Now comes the next trial, understanding the silent language of status and floor placement. You shift slightly and glance around. There are maybe 200 people in this grand hall, though it feels like twice that thanks to the mirrored walls, an architectural decision that turns a feast into a performance and every guest into their own audience. You catch your reflection and realize you look nervous, but with a hint of mystery, like someone who once read 3 pages of the Avesta and vaguely remembers one. The hall is tiered, not physically but socially. Closest to the king are the satraps, the governors of vast provinces who hold power just shy of godhood. They sit on carved stools, not cushions, because nothing says I own half of Anatolia like having back support. Just behind them are military elites and royal family members reclining sideways in the dramatic fashion of people who've never had to clean their own cooking pots. Further back down the metaphorical ladder, you find merchants, scribes, translators, and visiting dignitaries from lands so distant their accents sound like riddles. And then, well, there's your tier. The notables of uncertain importance. You're not nobody, but you're certainly not a somebody. You're politely tolerable. You could probably request an extra fig and not be flogged. The carpets are coated. You only notice it now. The one under the satraps has geometric patterns woven in genuine silver thread. Yours has repeating lotus blooms lovely, but with visible mending near the edges. And under one distant guest, a wide-eyed poet from Bactria, you're pretty sure it's just a reed mat with tassels glued on. Historians still argue whether banquet seating followed strict bureaucratic protocol or was subject to the whims of court favorites. There's one record of a perfume maker who gained a prime cushion spot for inventing a scent that made the king's hunting dog sneeze less. Another tale claims a foreign envoy once got demoted 2 tiers mid-feast after mispronouncing the Queen Mother's name. You keep your own pronunciation locked deep inside your skull just in case. A servant glides past you with a bronze bowl filled with something green and glossy. You glance at it, but not too long. Staring at food before it's served is considered needy. You are not needy. You are serene. Hungry, yes, but in a dignified ancient Persian way. Then there's the matter of posture. This is where your cushion becomes a tool of diplomacy. Too slouched. You look disrespectful. Too straight. You look rigid. You experiment with something in between a casual lean with just enough effort to suggest your spine is both relaxed and reverent. To your left, a man in a striped tunic adjusts his cushion a centimeter forward. Subtle but intentional. It puts him half an elbow ahead of the guests in his row. It's an assertive move. You make a mental note. If you ever host your own banquet, and let's be honest, that's a stretch, you'll remember this trick. Behind you, the musicians change tune. A more upbeat rhythm kicks in, gentle but rhythmic, accompanied by the soft swish of dancers entering. They are veiled, not fully visible, their arms moving in synchronized spirals that mimic the flow of wind or wine or something more abstract like ambition. Everyone watches, but no one claps. Applause is vulgar. Instead, guests express approval with subtle head tilts and minor beard stroking. Speaking of which, beard stroking is a whole language, a full stroke from chin to tip. That's deep thought. A short tug near the side. Disapproval. Scratching the jawline, nervousness. You're clean-shaven tonight, which makes things difficult. You try a small eyebrow raise. It works. No one banishes you. Then there's eye contact. You're allowed to glance toward the king once and briefly. Staring is a challenge. You do your one sanctioned glance. He's still behind his gauze, still watching. You lower your gaze quickly. You catch sight of a court official across the room. His robe is so heavily embroidered it rustles when he breathes. He makes a curious gesture, adjusting his cushion, rotating it slightly clockwise. It's like a sundial of ambition. You wonder what it means. Is he aligning with someone politically, claiming closer friendship to the musicians, or just having a really specific lumbar issue? A servant sets a small plate in front of you. It's a mosaic of color pink pickled garlic, pale cucumber curls, slivers of marinated quince. You are still not allowed to touch it yet, but it's a good sign. It means you've been noticed. You look down and suddenly feel very aware of your hands. What are they doing resting? Clasped open-palmed, there are rules. Open palms are associated with honesty. Clasped hands suggest humility. One hand resting gently on your knee is considered neutral. You go with that. It's a safe hand. Someone near the front sneezes. All heads turn briefly subtly. In normal life, a sneeze is just a sneeze. Here it could mean anything. Illness, divine omen. Garlic intolerance. The sneezing man dabs his face with a silk cloth printed with peacocks. He does not sneeze again. The banquet resumes its flow. You begin to see it all differently now. This isn't just a meal, It's a performance, a chessboard, a sermon in a dozen languages. Every cushion, every dish, every shift in posture is a statement, whether whispered or shouted. And in this room where silence often speaks louder than words, you begin to listen more carefully. And finally, the steward approaches. He pauses just long enough to be dramatic, then bows. You may eat. The first course is officially open. The moment the steward gives the nod, the energy in the hall shifts. You don't hear a shout or a trumpet or even a polite throat clear. But you feel it, that collective loosening of breath, like everyone has been pretending they weren't starving for the past half hour. And then it hits you, the fragrance. It rolls through the air like warm silk saffron, roasted lamb, stewed cherries, sumac, cinnamon. A hint of something floral, maybe rose, maybe something more exotic like orange blossom water kissed by moonlight and middle management ambition. You're not sure, but your stomach definitely applauds. A parade of servants glides forward, each moving with the precision of people who've practiced not spilling broth for years. Their trays are wide, their limbs are steady, and their faces are unreadable. They've probably seen it all: satraps licking their fingers, queens refusing olives, poets sobbing into pilaf. You sit very still. This is the moment where you're supposed to appear at once eager and utterly indifferent. The servant before you kneels and places a small dish on the low table at your cushion. On it, a small wedge of lamb glistening with pomegranate glaze, flanked by 2 delicate fig rounds and a scoop of barley with parsley. It's art. You hesitate just long enough to honor it, then pick up the silver spoon provided. No forks here, those are still centuries away from being a good idea. You take your first bite, and yes, it's absurdly good. The lamb practically melts. The pomegranate dances with a tart sparkle that feels almost modern. The barley is nutty and warm. You nearly hum in appreciation but stop yourself. No vocalizing. This isn't a tavern. You chew gracefully. At least you think it's graceful. Around the room, a soft rustle of chewing and faint clinks begins, quiet but oddly comforting. This is the sound of sanctioned satisfaction. You glance up to see how others are doing. The merchant with the parrot is now getting hand-fed by his wife, who delicately pinches bits of food and places them in his mouth like he's some kind of aristocratic baby bird. You look back down at your lamb. You're happy feeding yourself. You have self-respect and coordination. The dishes arrive in waves. A stew thick with lentils and sour cherries. A sweet yogurt sauce with rose petals. Triangles of flatbread so thin you can read ancient poetry through them. You resist the urge to hoard anything. Greed is a major etiquette red flag. You pace yourself like a pro. Slow, deliberate, appreciative. You imagine a Zoroastrian priest somewhere nodding in approval. And then comes the fish. This one's tricky. It arrives grilled, delicately dusted with herbs and lime zest. The smell is subtle. You don't want to look suspiciously at it, but you can't help it. Fish at a banquet this far inland. Either it's an imported delicacy or a digestive gamble. You remember a story told in whispers. One guest tried to impress a court official by taking the largest piece of banquet fish. Hours later, he allegedly had a vision of the prophet Zoroaster throwing sandalwood at him. Or it was food poisoning. Either way, legend status. Still, you go for the smallest piece. Safe, dignified, not terribly brave, but you can live with that. Literally, a new dish arrives. Sorbet. Yes, ancient Persian sorbet. It's not a myth. They really did it. Snow carried down from the mountains and mixed with grape juice, honey, and sometimes ground saffron. It's like chilled poetry. You take a bite and your eyes involuntarily close. It's cold, sweet, and somehow gently smacks you in the soul. Historians still argue whether these extravagant food parades were more ceremonial than nourishing. Some believe each course held symbolic meaning: loyalty, prosperity, fertility, or the eternal flame of good governance. Others think the whole thing was just to show off who had access to ice in July. Your favorite dish so far? A mystery paste made from crushed walnuts, garlic, and mint, spread delicately on a sliver of apricot. It's strange, unexpected, but it lingers on your tongue like the memory of a good lie. You glance at the king. He's still behind his veil, but now he's sipping something from a goblet. Not gulping, sipping. That means wine is officially in play. Here comes the next wave. A server offers you a goblet carved from alabaster filled with deep red Shiraz wine. You hold it correctly, never with both hands, never raised too high. This is not a toast. This is a sip of connection, a symbolic nod to both the bounty of the land and the absolute hierarchy you live under. You sip. It's surprisingly smooth, fruity, possibly dangerous. Wine etiquette here is another puzzle. You never pour your own, and if someone pours for you, you must tilt your head just slightly in gratitude. Pour for someone else without being asked, and you might be assuming too much. Pour too little, and it's an insult. Pour too much, and you're implying they need it. You don't win, you just survive. Someone sneezes again. This time, no one flinches. The wine has mellowed everyone slightly. Or maybe it's the sorbet, or the lamb, or the psychic weight of having so many table rules. You are, however, fully present. You're not just eating. You're performing consumption. Every movement is theater. Every swallow is diplomacy. Even your crumbs are political. A servant now clears your plate with a speed and silence that suggests years of training and maybe a small personal vendetta against crumbs. The dishes disappear like magic replaced with small bowls of rosewater for rinsing your fingers. You dip, swirl, and pat dry with a linen square folded to resemble a lotus. Of course it is. You lean back just slightly, reclining as permitted now within limits, and look around the hall. You've made it through 10,000 dishes, survived potential fish-based scandals, and managed not to compliment the apricot paste too enthusiastically. The banquet is far from over, but your first real meal in this room of whispering wealth has come to a successful saffron-scented close. And you haven't spilled a thing. Just when you think you've survived the culinary onslaught and can finally coast on a gentle wave of rosewater and good decisions, another ritual unfolds, this time without plates, spoons, or any hint of what's about to happen. The clinking dies down, the zither hushes, the aroma of roasted things retreats, and then they arrive. The servers carrying golden ewers, tall vessels shaped like elegant question marks, engraved with winged bulls and lions that look mildly disappointed in you. Alongside the ewers come long-handled basins polished so brightly you can see the confusion in your own reflection. You straighten. This you've heard of. The hand-washing ritual. Again. But unlike the pre-dinner dip in rose water, which was more of a polite splash, this one is elaborate, symbolic. A spectacle performed by the servers and endured by the guests with grimy humility. You keep your palms visible and hope the apricot paste wasn't that sticky. The ewer bearer arrives with a basin-holding assistant at his side. Neither says a word. One tips the ewer gently over your outstretched hands. Warm water flows. The assistant catches it in the basin below. Then a perfumed cloth appears, soft as a whisper with the faint smell of citrus and cloves. You dab your fingers, pretending you do this every Tuesday. The whole hall is now in synchrony, row after row of guests undergoing this ceremonial rinse. It's part cleanliness, part spiritual reset, and part social recalibration. You're symbolically washing away the indulgence of the last course, readying yourself for the next. It's not just etiquette, it's a reset button. Historians still debate whether this mid-feast cleansing was strictly religious or simply practical. Some argue it stems from Zoroastrian purity laws, preserving spiritual cleanliness after handling meat or anything that once had eyes. Others think it's just a clever way to keep the king from watching his guests lick their fingers like goats in embroidered robes. Either way, it's taken seriously. You look to your right. The woman next to you is holding her wrists delicately like they're sacred. To your left, someone actually bows to the water bearer. A little much, but perhaps a nice touch if you're trying to stand out without saying a word. Once your hands are dry and your dignity restored, you lower them onto your lap, fingers resting lightly like you've just given a eulogy for a fig. The servers vanish as quickly as they came, disappearing into side passages carved behind ornate curtains. For all you know, those hallways lead to kitchens the size of provinces or to other banquets entirely. With hands now pure and expectations reset, your attention is gently tugged to the next sensation in the air: incense. Thick, sweet, and confusing. Golden braziers are carried out short, wide-mouthed bowls on tall stands filled with smoldering bits of resin herbs, and what you swear smells like sandalwood mixed with last year's taxes. The scent rolls across the floor like fog clinging to cushions, robes, and conversation. You blink and rub your nose, which immediately offends the guest behind you, who believes any gesture above shoulder height is disruptive. You shrug apologetically. He returns a slow blink, which either means I forgive you or I hope you dream of scorpions. The fragrance is more than olfactory wallpaper. It serves a purpose. Several, actually. First, it masks the more organic smells of the feast. Roasted meats, human bodies, anxious sweat. Second, it signals a shift in tone. The initial meal was sustenance. Now comes the reflective portion of the banquet. The philosophical one. The spiritual even. Third, it keeps bugs away. No one says this aloud, of course, but you watch as a mosquito attempts to brave a brazier's plume and immediately spirals into retirement. You try to focus. The incense is doing strange things to your memory. You start to recall a childhood fig orchard and an uncle who believed he could speak to trees. Then that memory floats away, replaced by the realization that your cushion has shifted half an inch. You correct it carefully. Just then a storyteller begins to speak, not loudly, not with flourish, but slowly, rhythmically. It takes you a moment to realize what's happening. This is part of the banquet. A sanctioned tale likely rehearsed for weeks, delivered by a man wearing 10 rings and a head wrap that practically sighs with wisdom. His voice is deep, gravelly. He speaks of the founding of Persepolis, of kings who could command rivers and queens who tamed tigers. You can't tell how much is fact and how much is embroidered with figments and wine, but no one cares. Every head in the room tilts toward the sound like flowers toward the sun. A whisper of debate still exists among scholars. Were these stories commissioned by the state to subtly reinforce ideology, or were they pure entertainment? The truth probably lies somewhere between. You can't help but notice that every moral ends with some variation of, and then the king wise and benevolent restored balance to the world. Convenient but poetic. As the story wraps, the king gestures again. A different kind of procession begins. Not food, not fragrance, but gifts. Servants begin distributing small tokens, tiny scrolls, carved trinkets, even scented pouches. Not everyone receives one. You don't, but that's fine. You pretend you weren't expecting anything. The man 2 cushions over gets a gold pin shaped like a lion's head. He stares at it like he's just been proposed to. Receiving a gift means you've been seen, acknowledged, maybe promoted in someone's invisible list of people to take seriously. You're just happy your cushion still has stuffing. Your head is spinning now. The incense is curling deeper into your nose, the warmth of the wine lingers in your chest, and your freshly washed hands smell faintly of marjoram and power. You lean back slightly, only slightly, and exhale. You've survived the water ritual. You're perfumed, powdered, and perfectly poised. Just in time for the wine to get interesting. The wine has been flowing for a while now, not fast, not reckless, but in steady rhythmic waves like a slow tide washing over a very well-dressed beach. At first you were cautious, a sip here, a delicate tilt there. You watched others mimicking their restraint. But now, with fingers scented from rosewater and incense curling gently through your thoughts, you realize something has changed in the room. The tempo is different. Not faster, just softer, looser. People lean more heavily into their cushions now. Conversations which before were little more than murmurs and throat clears start to drift upward in volume. A few guests even laugh a refined, mostly nasal sort of laughter, but laughter nonetheless. The etiquette of silence is starting to erode under the slow heat of Shiraz wine. Your own goblet has been refilled twice, perhaps 3 times. It's hard to say. No one pours their own. A servant appears, silently fills the cup, and disappears again like a polite specter in linen sandals. You look around. Several guests have started swirling their goblets with theatrical flair. One man is attempting to identify the notes in his wine. He swears it contains juniper plum and something called victory. Another compares his to a poem his grandmother once recited in a thunderstorm. Historians still argue whether the wine served at these banquets was diluted or strong enough to make a satrap weep into his couscous. The truth likely varied. Some texts describe it being cut with water and herbs, while others hint at a syrupy, nearly medicinal version designed to stun rather than delight. Yours tastes somewhere in between bold floral with a strange smoky aftertaste, like a vineyard that read too much poetry. To drink, however, is not merely to sip and slosh. Persian etiquette governs it like everything else. Take too small a sip. You appear guarded. Too large. Greedy. You must drink like you're savoring the memory of an ancient flame, subtle, wistful, with the occasional eyebrow raise. You try this. It results in a small cough. You play it off as a contemplative sigh. Now comes the real danger timing. You cannot drink before the king. But he's already signaled, so now the rules shift. You mustn't finish before others of higher rank near you. You glance to your left. The merchant is only halfway through his cup. To your right, the poet has finished his and is now composing a verse about figs in midair with his fingertip on the table. You take a modest second sip, acceptable. In the far corner, a minor noble attempts to stand while still holding his goblet. Gasps ripple outward like a breeze across a still lake. He falters, realizes his sin, and quickly reseats himself with the grace of someone trying not to vomit dignity. A steward appears almost instantly with a tiny linen cloth, dabs the rim of his cup, and moves on without eye contact. It's a reminder there are still rules. You may be tipsy. You may feel your speech loosening like an old knot, but you're still in the shadow of the king, and one misstep here could unmake a year's worth of carefully sculpted reputation. You cradle your goblet now with both hands. Not to drink, just to warm it to seem occupied. Other guests have done the same. It's a signal of satisfaction, of restraint, of not needing more, though deep down you kind of do. Nearby, a satrap begins to toast. He doesn't stand, no one dares. He merely raises his goblet to shoulder-height, glances toward the king, and speaks a single line, "May your days be honeyed, and your enemies sticky." There's a ripple of restrained chuckles. The king nods once. Permission granted humor is now acceptable in small doses. You wonder if you should try something witty. A compliment, maybe? You rehearse a few lines in your head. "Your Highness, your governance is smoother than this Shiraz." Too obvious. "May your beard collect no crumbs." Too intimate. Even the figs tremble in your presence. Too weird. You opt for silence. A good choice. One guest across the room, less lucky, less subtle, attempts a joke about camels and is met with a silence so pure it could curdle milk. He does not speak again for the remainder of the evening. Wine etiquette also includes the art of the shared pour. If someone of equal rank leans toward you, lifts their goblet slightly, and raises a brow, that is a signal, a challenge, a social embrace wrapped in fermented grapes. And so it happens the merchant beside you does exactly that. You tilt your goblet in response. He pours slowly, expertly, until your wine hums just shy of the rim. You nod. He nods. That's it. You are now officially cordial in the court's invisible friendship ledger. It's how alliances are born. Quietly. With wine, not war. You return the gesture, pouring for him with a steady hand and a prayer to not dribble. You succeed. He smiles not with his mouth but with his eyebrows, which arch like two crescent moons of approval. The music swells again, this time with a faster rhythm. Dancers reappear. Their movements are sharper now, still elegant, but pulsing with energy. The wine has transformed the room. It's still sacred, still laced with etiquette, but now it breathes. People are talking softly, laughing carefully. The atmosphere hums like the inside of a shared secret. You take one final sip, enough to keep the warmth blooming in your chest. Not so much that you forget where you are. Your cushion, your hands. The king still watching from his throne behind the veil. You're navigating the currents now, drifting with purpose. The wine has unlocked something, not freedom exactly, but grace. Permission. The banquet is no longer just a ritual. It's becoming an experience. And somewhere deep inside you feel a small, steady pride. You haven't just survived the wine. You've danced with it. As the wine settles into the bones of the evening and the shadows lengthen across the gold-threaded rugs, you feel the feast shift again, this time not into food or ritual, but something murkier, trickier. A new phase begins, the conversation tier. You've noticed it happening all around you. Guests lean closer to their neighbors. Voices grow softer but more pointed. Not drunken babble, no. This is something more refined, more dangerous. It's politely veiled scheming. Welcome to the true heart of a Persian banquet, diplomacy dressed in silk, scented with cloves, and pretending to be small talk. It starts with a harmless question. The merchant beside you, he of the perfectly arched eyebrows and suspiciously full wine knowledge, leans in slightly. Do you believe the canals in Babylon will ever be completed? He murmurs almost lazily. You nod slowly, mouth full of pomegranate seed. I've heard they're diverting engineers from Susa. Risky. He chuckles softly. Riskier if they don't divert them. You know how the Queen Mother feels about unfinished projects. Ah, there it is. He's testing you. You offer a careful, non-committal smile, the kind that could mean, I agree, or I know something I'm not telling you, or I'm still deciding whether you're trying to get me killed. Historians still debate whether these banquets were informal political councils in disguise, or simply rich people being bored together. But the way glances flick across the room, the way words are weighed like gold, it's clear nothing said here is meaningless. You're not here just for dates and roasted duck. You're here to listen, to hint, to be hinted at. Your tongue must be as graceful as your posture. To your left, a poet and a scribe are having a curiously intense discussion about the hidden meanings of cedar trees in court poetry. You suspect they're actually discussing someone's recent demotion. The word cedar gets whispered like it's carrying tax documents in its bark. Further down the line, two generals speak in half sentences about border tensions. One casually mentions troublesome winds from the west. You don't know if he's talking about sandstorms or rebels or both, maybe neither. But everyone nearby tilts their heads just slightly in acknowledgement. Message received. Your merchant friend is still watching you. His goblet rests untouched, balanced delicately on his knee. You trade in spices, don't you? He says softly. You blink. Sometimes. Good, he says. The king's cousin has developed a fondness for cumin. A strong fondness. You nod again. Carefully. That might be an opportunity, or a trap, or just come and gossip. A few cushions over, a woman with intricate henna across her fingers is laughing just a little too loudly. She tosses her hair back and says something about royal falconers needing better leashes. The man beside her, dressed in rich velvet and visibly sweating, responds with a joke about falcons preferring freedom. The entire table briefly freezes. Even the falcon jokes are loaded. And then, just as your mind starts piecing together which guests belong to which provinces, who might be spying for whom, and why the poet keeps scratching his ear, when the king's name is mentioned, someone addresses you directly. Tell me, says a voice from behind. You turn. It's a scholar, maybe a philosopher, draped in pale gray. His eyes are sharp, his beard shaped like a question mark. Do you believe the stars favor swift decisions or cautious ones? Oh no, it's a banquet riddle question. A classic move. You've just been challenged to show wisdom without being smug insight, without overstepping. You pause. That depends, you say slowly. Are the stars watching a battlefield or a dinner table? There's a flicker of the smile. You've done well. He nods satisfied and turns his attention elsewhere. You breathe. This is how alliances begin, how rivalries are seeded, how rumors are quietly born between mouthfuls of honey-glazed trout. The dancers are back. Their arms arc like wings. Their feet never quite seem to touch the floor. They're not just entertainment, they're cover, a distraction softening the air while strategy takes shape in silence. A servant appears beside you and quietly offers you a tiny clay tablet. This is unexpected. You glance down, etched in neat, practiced cuneiform. You are invited to a discussion after the final course. The cedar alcove, midnight. You blink. It has no signature. You do not react. You tuck the tablet into the folds of your robe with a hand as calm as still water. But inside, your mind races. Who sent it? The king, the merchant, the poet with the itchy ear. You sip your wine, cool, deliberate, and return your attention to the room. Everyone looks normal. Too normal. Across the hall, the king remains motionless. He's not eating, not drinking, just watching, as if he knows that in this moment the food is secondary, the wine secondary. Even the music, the dancers, the rituals, they're all staging for what really matters. What gets said between bites. You've passed through the etiquette of entry. You've survived the layers of serving and sipping. Now you're inside the delicate machinery of conversation, of veiled intent, of speech dressed in metaphor and shaded with implication. You're in it now, and the banquet is far from over. You don't look at the tablet again. That's the first rule. Looking shows anxiety. Rereading implies uncertainty. And uncertainty at a Persian banquet is social spinach in your teeth, noticeable, regrettable, and sure to be whispered about behind perfumed fans. So you tuck the little clay message deeper into your robe and shift your attention outward where it belongs. The hall is now aglow with lamplight bronze and amber, flickering gently across golden platters and rings, and beads of sweat on people pretending not to sweat. Everything smells faintly of cinnamon, citrus, and politics. You're full, not just of food, full of posture, of protocol, of wine and whispers and withheld opinions. Your stomach is a scroll, layered with secrets and stews. The next course arrives and you blink. It's not food, it's entertainment, but not the dancers this time. This is something different. A man enters face-painted robe stitched with impossible threads that shimmer blue, green, and silver all at once. Behind him, a musician plays a slow, repetitive drone on what looks like a hollowed-out turtle shell. And the man begins to perform. He does not speak. Instead, he mimes. That's right. You've now entered the mime portion of the banquet. No one warned you. Historians are still scratching their heads about this one. Some scrolls describe silent comedic performances of moral instruction as popular features of royal events. Others insist this was just one king's bizarre preference, possibly inspired by a dream about a goat that couldn't speak. The scholarly debate remains fierce. But here it is, the performer begins with exaggerated motions mimicking a man trying to steal from a market, getting caught, then somehow becoming a donkey. The crowd chuckles, not loudly, just enough to signal cultural literacy. You nod thoughtfully as if this is your favorite genre of moral allegory. To your right, the merchant is smirking. To your left, the poet is deeply invested. He gasps when the performer accidentally kicks a wine jug across the stage. A servant scurries to replace it. You relax into the cushion watching the mime prance writhe and eventually collapse into a dramatic death scene that involves flapping his hands like startled chickens. The room erupts not in laughter but in a sort of nasal exhalation of approval. In ancient Persia, that's the equivalent of a standing ovation. You follow suit. The mime bows so low his forehead taps the tile. Then he's gone, swallowed into one of those side corridors that seem to devour people without ever making a sound. And just like that, the room resets, the music dims. The clinking softens, the banquet exhales. Servants return this time with small bowls of sugared nuts and pressed melon slices. Palate refreshers. You nibble because you must, not because you want to, but that's how it works. And now you feel it. The hour is bending. The laughter softens. The dancers slow. The wine stops sloshing and begins to settle. The incense is heavier now, thicker in the corners of the room, like it's deciding to sleep where it lands. The banquet is transitioning again, and this phase is subtler. The midnight lull, that sacred space where people grow quiet, introspective, a little fragile around the edges. This is when old arguments surface, when invitations are whispered, when mistakes are most likely to be made. The poet speaks. You don't know his name, but he has a voice like velvet dropped in a river. When the moon leans, he says, so too must the heart. No one asks what it means. Everyone nods as if they understand completely. You feel your body growing heavier. Not sleepy exactly, just draped, like your limbs are wrapped in ceremonial cloth, and your thoughts have grown ceremonial too. And then you remember the clay tablet, the cedar alcove. You scan the room subtly. It's not labeled, of course. But you know cedar when you smell it resinous bright, a little medicinal. You catch a trace of it coming from the far side of the hall, where a curtain of finely woven reeds parts slightly to reveal a darker chamber beyond. That's the place. No one else seems to be moving yet. Probably waiting, watching, pretending not to notice that the final course hasn't been served because this final part isn't for everyone. The final course isn't sweetmeats or spiced milk. It's information. You wait. Across the room, the merchant locks eyes with you, just for a second. Then he looks away. Was he the one who sent the message? The king shifts on his platform. The guards don't move, but they seem more alert. A ripple moves through the cushions closest to the throne, people adjusting their posture, clearing their throats, swallowing words they were about to say. You realize the banquet isn't winding down. It's sharpening. What comes next will be whispered, not served. You press your palms together like in the early rosewater ritual. It calms your breath, lets you pretend your fingers aren't trembling slightly. The cedar alcove awaits. You may not be ready, but you're going. You rise. Not fast, not like someone excited or desperate or freshly poisoned, but slowly, as though you simply need to stretch. Perhaps admire the braziers from a better angle. A yawn would sell the illusion, but that's too bold. You settle for a half-step pivot, then meander gently toward the reed curtain. No one stops you. No one speaks. Which is good because right now your heartbeat is echoing louder than the zithers. The scent of cedar sharpens as you draw close to the alcove. Not overpowering, just enough to make your nostrils prickle, and your thoughts feel freshly carved. You brush past the reeds. They whisper as they sway like gossip trying to disguise itself as wind. The room beyond is small, private, lit by a single low oil lamp. The flame dances in a bowl of hammered bronze, casting soft shadows that flicker like secrets. The air is cooler here, quieter, as if the banquet has been muted by thick, ancient stone. And you're not alone. Two figures are already seated within. One, you recognize the merchant, of course. The other, the poet. His hands are stained faintly with ink. His face is calm, too calm, like he's used to sitting in dark corners with dangerous intent and faint snack residue on his lips. They glance at you, then back to each other. You're not formally invited to sit, but you do anyway. It's that kind of space, casual with teeth. For a long moment, no one speaks. Then the merchant leans forward. His voice is low, rich, touched with the smoothness of someone used to buying silence. You receive the message. You nod once. I did. The poet exhales. Good. That means the steward didn't eat it this time. You blink. They're joking, probably. You study their faces in the lamplight. Nothing gives them away. This could be a business deal, a minor conspiracy, a poetry club with odd meeting times. But you feel it this is important. Not by tone, not by words, by atmosphere. The way the cedar makes your tongue feel slightly dry. The way neither of them blinks too often. Finally, the merchant speaks again. You've heard of the king's interest in canal construction. You nod slowly. Everyone has. He chuckles. Not everyone knows it's a cover. You wait. The poet picks up where he leaves off. What they're really doing digging storage vaults. Stone-lined sealed. Below the waterline. Your brows draw in. For grain. The merchant gives a thin smile. For people. The silence sits between you like a full-second course no one ordered. Historians still argue whether Persia's canal systems were purely infrastructural or designed with hidden strategic purposes. Emergency bunkers, water diversion tactics, even hidden prisons. There's no consensus. But now, in this cedar-scented whisper box, you hear confirmation of one theory that always felt too theatrical to be true. They're storing people. For what, why you don't ask yet. Not because you aren't curious, but because the rules in this room are different. You let them offer. Something's shifting, the poet says quietly. Something beyond the banquet, beyond the court. The king is preparing. For war, you ask. The merchant shrugs, possibly, or something subtler, more internal. Dissent, you murmur. He lifts his wine goblet. Where did that come from? And swirls it. Dissent is always present, but lately it has teeth, hidden in the shadows of poetry and architecture. That makes sense. In the court, this ritualized rebellion wouldn't roar. It would whisper, through metaphors, in the placement of a rug. The sudden promotion of a steward's cousin, or the quiet reassignment of a satrap to a colder, hungrier province. The poet shifts. We need listeners. People who can sit quietly and recognize the shape of wrongness. You stare. You're recruiting. He nods once. Not spies. Observers. The king believes the banquet is the safest place to notice what the battlefield cannot show. The merchant leans back slightly. You have a talent for surviving uncomfortable silences. And your fig metaphor earlier was frankly underappreciated. A strange compliment, but you accept it. So here it is. Not a threat. Not exactly a job offer. Something in between a request to become part of an informal network. Listeners. Thinkers. People who can smell politics hiding behind lamb glaze and poetry. You feel yourself nodding before you consciously decide to. The merchant offers a tiny scroll parchment, rolled tight sealed, with red wax stamped with a lotus bloom. You'll know when to read it. You don't ask how. You just tuck it next to the clay tablet which is still warm somehow like it remembers being important. There's a pause. The poet looks toward the entrance. You should go. If you're seen leaving too late, someone will assume you're having an affair with a musician. And the musicians talk. You stand. No one says goodbye. You slip back through the reeds into the main hall, and everything looks different. Not visibly, but perceptually. You notice who's reclining more casually, who's leaned away from their cup, who's eyeing the king's gauze-covered platform like it might dissolve. The banquet continues, but now you see it with new eyes. You haven't just eaten. You've been inducted. You return to your cushion like someone waking from a nap they weren't supposed to take. You sit exactly as you did before, legs tucked just so, elbows unassuming, goblet held lightly in your fingers as if you haven't just been briefed on a subterranean people storage operation under the guise of irrigation. Across the hall, the zither player yawns into his palm and resumes a slow, hypnotic rhythm. The dancers have vanished again, perhaps changing, perhaps resting, perhaps plotting a new routine involving falcons and social commentary. Either way, the room feels slower now, sleepier, not tired exactly, but softened. You exhale. The cushions are still warm. Your wine still has that sharp little citrus kiss. The merchant glances your way just once, barely noticeable. The poet gone, like mist or questionable funding. It's back to normal. Only of course it isn't, because now every cough sounds like a signal. Every glance is a possible message. Every slow pour of wine might be measured in units of conspiracy rather than milliliters. And then without warning, a new sound fills the room. Clapping, not thunderous, not theatrical, just a steady measured clap from a corner near the king's dais. Heads turn, yours among them. The king is not clapping. He never does. But a small group of attendants is moving toward the center of the hall carrying something. It's not food, not scrolls. It's books? No. Tablets? Clay ones. Carefully stacked, each wrapped in linen and sealed with wax. The clapping is for them. This is the recitation of names, a tradition as old as the empire itself. A ceremonial reading of guests who are being honored, remembered, or quietly warned. The tone is celebratory, but the consequences vary widely. Get your name read here, and your life changes. The only question is how. The lead scribe, an older man with the face of someone who's eaten too many figs and trusted too few people, steps into the lamplight. He begins. One name at a time. No explanations, just names spoken clearly, slowly, each followed by a polite round of applause from the room. You recognize a few. The satrap from Ecbatana, a noblewoman known for funding orphanages and tax loopholes. A scholar who hasn't spoken all evening but looks very pleased with himself now. Each name lands like the pebble in the room's collective consciousness. Some spark soft smiles. Others cause the smallest flickers of alarm. Tiny misalignments of posture, like people recalculating their proximity to someone now deemed of note. Historians still argue what the list truly meant. Some believe it was a reward for loyalty. Others insist it was a test. See how people react when a name is read, then adjust accordingly. Like social fishing. And then, your name. Not loudly, not quickly, just tucked in between two others. You freeze. Your wine is suddenly the wrong temperature. Your cushion too soft. The air thinner. People clap. Some glance at you politely. No gawking. Just enough to register your existence, your elevation. Or is it your evaluation? You nod slightly. Just enough to acknowledge the honor, not enough to seem desperate for it. You don't smile. Smiling would be too much. You adopt the expression of someone who's just remembered an excellent proverb but has decided not to share it. The clapping fades. The list ends. The scribe bows and retreats, and just like that, the moment passes. But not really. Because now you're marked. You've been seen. Publicly. Ceremonially. Perhaps as an asset, perhaps as a threat, or maybe as a bit of both. You can no longer blend in. Even your silence will now be measured. A server passes and discreetly places a single almond-stuffed date on your plate. Not food. Symbol. You're now considered digestible. You chew slowly, thoughtfully, pretending not to be incredibly aware of your chewing volume. Meanwhile, the conversation around you shifts. People speak a little more carefully now. Some lean toward you with faint smiles. Others suddenly find the ceiling fascinating. You've crossed an invisible line. And just as you start to digest this both figuratively and well literally, a trumpet sounds. Not a loud one. Not fanfare. Just a soft single note that hangs in the air like a punctuation mark. And the king rises. He doesn't speak. He doesn't need to. He simply lifts his hand and the room follows. Not a scramble. Just a practiced fluid wave of standing bodies. It's time for the moon procession. You didn't think you'd make it this far, honestly. The procession isn't a parade or dance. It's a symbolic walk, each guest in turn exiting through the moon gate, a curved archway carved with images of lunar cycles and mythic beasts that may or may not represent tax officials. No one rushes. You don't speak. You walk with the others, holding your posture like it owes you money. The king remains behind, watching, always. And then you're through the moon gate, stepping out into the cool desert night. The stars above Persepolis are blinding, ancient, possibly judging. Your breath curls in the air. The banquet is over, but everything else has only just begun. The stars over Persepolis seem different tonight, not just because you're finally outside, away from the lantern glow and incense haze of the hall. No, there's something else. A weight to them. As if they've been watching the entire banquet alongside the king, nodding silently at every secret you didn't realize you were part of until it was too late to back out. You inhale deeply. The desert air is crisp and surprisingly fragrant. Juniper dust, maybe a faint wisp of saffron from a distant kitchen still cleaning up spilled glory. You're not alone in the garden. The moon gate leads into a carefully arranged grove of cypress and myrtle, the foliage sculpted as deliberately as the banquet itself. Guests are trickling in, still silent, still solemn, walking, as if under a spell, or perhaps just walking off a mountain of roasted meats and geopolitical tension. This is the digestive promenade. Yes, that's a real thing. You've entered the last formal rite of the evening. The slow ceremonial walk through the royal garden meant to aid digestion, cool heated heads, and provide one final setting for whispered plotting in the moonlight. It's etiquette with landscaping. Historians agree this portion of the banquet had at least 3 purposes. 1, to prevent death by overindulgence, a real risk. Ask any forgotten noble whose statue now serves as a sundial. 2, to signal that no more business would be done tonight. And 3, to create just enough distance between decisions and regrets before dawn set in. You follow a meandering path beneath a trellis woven with night-blooming jasmine. The flowers pulse white in the dark, like stars that decided to grow closer to the gossip. Their scent is sharp and sweet, like a promise someone made with crossed fingers. Around you, conversations are happening in fragments. 2 nobles lean close, discussing the poet's performance earlier. One of them makes a joke about fig metaphors being a sign of rebellion. You keep walking. A cluster of younger guests giggle under a tree, talking about the satrap who knocked over his wine jug during the mime routine. He hasn't been that red since tax season, someone mutters. They're pretending the evening was all amusement. You envy their ability to pretend. And then you hear your name. You don't stop walking. That would be too obvious. But you listen. The voice is unfamiliar, low, female. Someone murmurs, surprised they were red. Hadn't even reached satrap level. Another replies, maybe that's the point. You keep walking. The stars keep watching. Soon you reach the edge of the garden, where a reflecting pool catches the moon in its center. A few guests pause here, not for reflection ironically, but for placement. Standing by the pool implies modesty mixed with importance. Those who linger near the water are signaling that they were not the most powerful tonight, but they will be soon. You do not linger. Instead, you drift left toward a lesser path shaded by date palms. It's quieter here, cooler. A voice slips in beside you. You handled it well. You don't jump. You don't flinch. You're learning. It's the poet again. How he's arrived here without a sound is unclear. Maybe he just reappears when conversations need him, like an omen or bad breath. He walks beside you, hands clasped behind his back. The name reading, he says. You didn't smile too much. That's rare. You glance over. I didn't want to look eager. Good instinct, he replies. They've removed people for less. You let that settle in the air like the scent of burnt honey. The poet stops beneath an olive tree. You're wondering what comes next. You nod. He reaches into his robe and pulls out a small, smooth stone, round and etched with a spiral. He holds it out. You hesitate, then take it. It's heavier than it looks, warm like the clay tablet before. You turn it in your fingers. What is it, you ask? A key, he replies. Not literal, just recognition. If you show this to the right person, they'll know you've been inside the cedar alcove. And if I show it to the wrong person, then you're just a guest who likes odd rocks, he says with a half smile. There's a pause. He adds, don't carry it forever. Just long enough to see who notices. Then he's gone. Not theatrically, just gone. Like a footnote that gets erased when the parchment is still wet. You're alone again. You walk back toward the main garden now, mostly empty. The last of the guests are making their way toward carriages, shadows, or private chambers you'll never be invited into. The night is ending, but you don't feel finished. You glance at the stone again. A spiral. An inward path. A sign that you've begun something you can't quite name yet. Something with rules that don't appear in etiquette scrolls or wine-pouring rituals. Something that will call on you again at another banquet in another city under another sky. You pocket the stone. The path ahead is dark, but you know the stars now. You've walked beneath them, watched them blink approval or warning above a court where power wears perfume and speaks in questions. And you've learned how to answer. You wake to the sound of doves arguing on the terrace. It's morning. Barely. The light is thin and golden, draped softly across the tiled floor like a robe the sun hasn't quite finished putting on. Your body aches in that oddly pleasant way reserved for long nights and longer conversations, the kind that leave your mind spinning and your joints complaining. You sit up slowly. Your guest chamber is modest, which is to say it only has 3 tapestries and a bed that could reasonably sleep 4. There's a bowl of dates by the window, a small ceramic pot still faintly steaming with leftover tea, a pair of sandals you're fairly certain weren't yours yesterday. Someone's left you a note. No name, no wax seal, just a square of parchment folded neatly. Inside, the king walks at dusk. Gardens west. Your pulse skips. A walk with the king. Or near him. Or near someone who wants you to think it's the king. This is how things go now. You've officially entered the portion of life that doesn't come with labels. Just breadcrumbs, mysterious messages, and people who smile too much when they're not speaking. You dress with care. Not extravagantly that would draw attention, but not plainly either. You select a robe the color of river clay with a subtle embroidered edge that looks like nothing unless the sun hits it just right. That should say I belong here, but I'm still digesting the almond-stuffed date of ambition. As you walk through the palace, life is already humming back into its bones. Servants sweep the mosaic floors with soft, bristled brooms made from date palm fibers. Musicians are tuning instruments under fig trees. A steward tries to juggle 3 plates and a wine schedule while arguing with a boy who's clearly too young to be carrying anything flammable. No one looks at you twice, which is perfect. Outside, the western gardens stretch like a painted dream. Geometric hedges, fragrant citrus groves, pathways, designed to lead somewhere only if you already know where you're going. The kind of garden where philosophy and espionage are natural outcomes of horticulture. And there at the edge of a marble pool stands a figure, not the king, at least not crowned, not flanked by guards, not performing monarchy with his usual restraint and terrifying grace. Just a man, dressed in cream-colored robes, sleeves rolled to his forearms, idly tracing his fingers through the water as if the empire weren't curled beneath his sandals. You approach with the hesitation of someone entering a riddle. He doesn't look up, just says, "Did you enjoy the banquet?" His voice is smooth, low, utterly calm. You pause. "I did." He smiles faintly. "Most people say that whether or not it's true." You paused. "That's better." You say nothing. He continues. "Do you know why we host them? You consider this. To reinforce loyalty, display power. Exchange information under a veil of leisure." He chuckles. "Very textbook. You've been reading the same scribes everyone else has, but that's not quite it." He stands now, stretches like someone who slept deeply and without regret. "We host them," he says, "because silence is dangerous. A court that doesn't speak together eventually forgets how." That's not what you expected. He turns to face you fully. Eyes sharp, not unkind. "You were read last night." You nod. He steps closer. "That wasn't a reward." You nod again. Slower this time. "It was an invitation." And an invitation is a door. It opens, but it also watches who walks through. This is no longer polite conversation. This is a test. You speak carefully. "I walked through." He studies your face. "Yes, but you haven't stepped inside yet." Then he reaches into his robe and pulls something from a hidden pocket. Another stone, this one obsidian black, polished, shaped not like a spiral, but like an eye. He holds it out. You don't take it yet. That would be presumptuous. You wait. Do you know what this means, he asks. You resist the urge to lie. Not yet. Good, he says. Because the moment you do, you can't unknow it. He places the stone in your palm. It's cold, heavier than it looks, just like the last one. You close your fingers around it. The king steps back. You'll be asked for it eventually. By someone who won't admit they're asking. You nod. You'll know what to say. And with that, he walks away. No guards, no trumpets, just silk brushing against jasmine as he vanishes into shadow. You stay by the pool for a long moment. The reflection of the sky shimmers on the surface, and you watch the black stone break the image into ripples as you lower your hand. You're not afraid. You're ready-o. Not quite, but willing. That's enough. For now, you return to your chambers with the black stone in your pocket and 1,000 new questions jostling for space in your chest. The walls of the palace seem narrower now, not physically but conceptually. Each hallway feels like a choice, each stairway a possibility. Every servant you pass could be someone who knows what the eye-shaped stone means, or someone who very much shouldn't. You begin to notice things. Tiny marks etched into the corners of door frames. 2 handmaidens speaking in code disguised as a conversation about fabric dyes. A tray of figs delivered to the wrong chamber. 3 fruits short, no explanation. You're not paranoid. You're tuned in. It's as if receiving that obsidian stone unlocked a new frequency inside your brain. And now the world hums just a little differently. The silk buzz of power, the soft thud of invisible rules everywhere all at once. The scroll you were handed back at the banquet still sits unopened in your chest. You haven't read it. Yet. You're waiting for the moment to feel right, and it comes faster than you expect. Just after noon, there's a knock at your door. Not the knock of a servant. It's too patient, too rhythmically neutral. You open it to find a young woman standing there, perhaps 20. Maybe younger, maybe older. It's hard to tell in a place where makeup, politics, and dehydration all age people unevenly. She doesn't bow, just holds up a slip of folded parchment. You're summoned. By whom? She shrugs. Someone who wears fewer rings than they can afford. That's all I know. Then she leaves. You unfold the slip. 2 words, reading room. Of course, because where else would you go to not read a possibly booby-trapped scroll and carry an unnameable stone shaped like an eyeball? You head there immediately. The reading room is deeper in the palace than you've ever ventured. Past the satrap portraits beyond the silver fountain with fish carved to look like worried accountants. The hallway grows dimmer, the walls lined with high dusty shelves and scrolls that look like they haven't been touched since last year's minor solar eclipse. The door is unmarked. Inside silence. And a smell. Dry parchment, lamp oil. Cinnamon faint but persistent. And one person waiting. Not the merchant. Not the poet. Not even the king. It's someone new. A man perhaps in his 40s, seated cross-legged on a rug that looks older than the empire. He wears no jewelry, no badge, just a dark robe, and the kind of stillness that makes you instinctively want to apologize for existing. You have it, he asks without looking up. You reach into your robe and place the black stone before him. His eyes finally lift. They are gray, not stormy, not soft, just gray, like polished slate. He studies the stone. Then you, then the stone again. You've been marked, he says, and tested, and observed. You wait. He leans forward slightly. Most fail, not in action, in timing. They rush. They peek at the scroll too soon. They try to make the stone mean something. You're still silent. He gestures toward a small table. Now you may open it. You do. Your fingers move carefully, breaking the red wax seal with a dull pop that feels far louder in this room of whispers and waiting. You unroll the scroll. At first glance, it's a poem, or a riddle, or both. It reads, "When the river forgets its name, the fish must become cartographers. When shadows argue with the sun, only blind men see clearly." You look up. He's smiling faintly. What does it mean, you ask? He shrugs. Nothing. Everything? Depends who's asking. You narrow your eyes. And who am I then? He leans back. A guest, a student, a possible problem. He points to the scroll again. It's not for interpretation. It's for repetition. Memorize it. Say it in your sleep. Say it if questioned. Say it before you say anything else. You blink. It's a passphrase. He nods. Of sorts. More like a song that tells certain people you're worth listening to. And the stone. He gestures toward it. That gets you through locked doors. Once. Only once. He smiles. Only once. But once is enough. Then he stands. You realize you've been dismissed. The black stone and the scroll remain on the rug. You pick them both up carefully, reverently, like they might bite you. Outside, the air seems brighter, louder. You're not sure if anything has changed. But you are now someone carrying a phrase, a secret, and a one-time key to a door you don't even know exists yet. The banquet is long over. But the ritual, it's only deepening. You don't go straight back to your chambers. Carrying a riddle scroll and a one-use obsidian eyeball is not something you do on autopilot. You need time, space, and plausible deniability in case someone asks why your pockets suddenly clink like you've stolen a philosopher. So you wander, casually of course, not suspiciously. You take the long route through the palace gardens past the aviary where peacocks scream like cursed flutes past the water clock courtyard where time passes in droplets rather than hours. It's here that you pause. The garden is nearly empty save for one boy sleeping awkwardly on a stone bench, mouth open, fingers still smudged with ink from some scroll he probably forgot to deliver. The wind shifts and brings you a scent of lemon blossoms and slightly overboiled barley. You sit. Not because you're tired, but because it gives you a moment to think in stillness. The riddle rings in your mind again. When the river forgets its name, the fish must become cartographers. When shadows argue with the sun, only blind men see clearly. It doesn't mean anything. It means everything. You say it softly under your breath, like a chant, like a spell. It tastes strange in your mouth, half poetry, half key. Somewhere in the palace, someone is waiting for those words. Someone who will hear them and know you are not just a guest anymore, you are part of something. But you still don't know what. A memory surfaces. At the banquet, the king's cousin had laughed too quickly when someone mentioned mountain snow in the summer. You hadn't noticed then. But now it seems odd. What did he know? What did you miss? And the poet. His fingers stained with ink whose ink his own someone else's. You stand. Back to your chambers now. The palace corridors seem longer than usual. The walls feel slightly too narrow, as if the building itself has begun to lean in, listening to your thoughts. At your door, you stop. It's slightly open. You didn't leave it that way. You wait, listening. No footsteps, no voices, just the faint rustle of a curtain. You push gently. The room is empty, but not untouched. Your water jug has been moved half an inch to the left. One sandal is no longer aligned with its twin, and the fig bowl is gone completely. A different bowl now sits in its place, identical in shape, but filled with plums. This is a message, or a test. In the court of Persia, even your fruit bowl can be an act of espionage. You walk to the center of the room, then sit cross-legged on your cushion, laying the obsidian stone and scroll gently before you. The message was clear. They know where you are. They know what you're carrying. So what now? A whisper from the doorway. May I come in? It's the merchant. Of course it is. He steps inside with the ease of someone who's trespassed often and never been caught. You've received your verse, he says. You nod. And your stone. You show him. He raises his eyebrows just slightly. I thought it might be that one. Fitting. He doesn't explain why. Instead, he sits opposite you, legs folded neatly, expression unreadable. There's a gathering tonight, he says. Not a banquet. Not a celebration. Just a few people who understand things. Things that don't get spoken aloud. You nod again. You're doing that a lot now, answering questions that feel like they're made of silk and thorns. Will the king be there? No, he says. Then after a pause, but someone will who speaks with his breath. That sounds worse than it probably is. Or maybe better. You can't tell anymore. He stands again. The words don't say them to anyone else. Not yet. Not unless prompted. Not unless invited. You understand. The scroll is not a greeting. It's a password, but also a blade, a marker, a whispered song that could cut you free or tie you tighter depending on who hears it. He moves toward the door, pauses, then glances back. Change the plums back to figs before you leave. Someone might be watching to see if you notice. Then he's gone. You sit there for a long time watching the stone catch the light from the window. It gleams softly, silently, as if it's listening. You pick it up. Hold it to your forehead. Cold, heavy, necessary. Later tonight you will go to the gathering. You will wear neutral colors, eat only the food offered twice, and speak only when spoken to. You will wait for the moment someone says the first line of the scroll. You will answer, and the spiral will turn again. Dusk in Persepolis arrives not with thunder, but with suggestion. The light changes, first softening like the world is being wrapped in rose-colored linen. Then the sounds shift. Birds grow quiet. Musicians begin slow meandering phrases on long-necked lutes, more for themselves than for an audience. And in the far west of the palace, behind an unmarked bronze gate, the gathering begins. You wear gray, not too pale, not too dark, a robe that can fade into shadows or lamplight as needed. You walk with confidence, but the quiet kind. The kind that says, I belong here, not, I dare you to stop me. The path to the gathering is intentionally unremarkable. A side hallway off the kitchens, past the stairwell where no one whistles. Through a narrow door once painted green and now just forgotten. You enter a room, not a grand one, not like the banquet hall. This space is modest, cushioned, lamplit quiet. A circle has already formed, perhaps a dozen figures. Some you recognize, some you don't. The poet is here. The merchant, too. A woman you recall from the garden who once fanned herself with alarming precision. A steward. A wine steward, you think? But he's not carrying any wine now. No one speaks. They're waiting. For you. You take the only remaining seat low to the side, but clearly intentional. No center exists in this room. Only a perimeter. Only a shared edge. Someone clears their throat. And then at last the words, when the river forgets its name, the voice is soft but certain. It's the woman with the fan. Your turn. You speak the next line. The fish must become cartographers. A pause. Then someone else continues. When shadows argue with the sun. And another finishes. Only blind men see clearly. A breath. And just like that, you are in. The circle exhales in near unison, and conversation begins not in haste, not in urgency, but like a stream resuming its flow after passing under a bridge. Topics are strange. One person references the recent delay in lotus shipments, not as a trade concern, but as a message perhaps indicating political hesitation from a satrap in the east. Another wonders aloud about the sudden increase in left-handed scribes within the king's archive. Coincidence, doubtful. They speak in puzzles, in suggestion, in threads left dangling for others to pull. And you follow, not by shouting answers, but by tugging gently, offering a detail you recall from the banquet. A whisper from the garden, a symbol you saw etched on a fruit bowl. They listen, they nod. At one point the poet leans in, smiling. You learn quickly. You respond without thinking. You talk cryptically. He laughs. That's what keeps us alive. The discussion drifts. Eventually the merchant raises a hand. The room quiets. There is a rumor, he says, that the canals beneath the city are not just vaults, not just escape routes, but traps, built to flood, to divide, to isolate. Silence. Then the fan woman speaks. If it's true, then someone plans to use the city itself as a weapon. The wine steward looks ill. No one offers certainty, only hypotheses, only questions. That's the point here. Certainty is for those outside the circle. Inside, you trade an implication. The poet looks at you. Would you flood a city to save it? You meet his gaze. Depends who you're saving it from. He nods once. The gathering continues an hour or two. You lose track. The air grows thicker, the candles shorter. No decisions are made, but decisions aren't the point. Connection is. Recognition is. When it's time, someone hums a single note low and long. The conversations fade. You rise one by one. No ceremony, no farewell. Just a quiet dispersal. You leave the way you came, through shadows, through corridors that pretend not to exist. Back to your chambers. This time the door is closed. The figs are back, and your water jug is just slightly tilted toward the west. You smile. Someone is acknowledging your return. You undress slowly. Fold your robe. Place the black stone beside your pillow. As you lie back, staring at the ceiling painted with flowers and forgotten gods, you feel something remarkable. Calm. You are no longer just a guest. No longer just a listener. You are part of the palace now, not just its rituals, but its hidden architecture. A whisper in its walls. A watcher in its shadows. And whatever happens next, flood famine poetry duel, you'll be ready. Because you know the rules. And better yet, you know which ones are meant to be broken. Now, as the palace stills and the moon lifts slowly over the tiled rooftops, your thoughts quiet too. You feel your body sink just a little deeper into the cushions beneath you. The whisper of night air drifts in through the carved stone window, cool and dry, scented faintly with myrrh and cedar. Your limbs relax. The tension of the evening, of the banquet, of the scroll and the stone, all of it begins to loosen its grip. You remember the garden path, the jasmine, the distant laughter of strangers. The poet's voice, soft, amused, wise in all the wrong ways. The riddles don't need solving tonight. Not now. Not with your breath slowing. Not with the silence blooming so sweetly around you. Let the empire do what empires do. Let the secrets sleep a while. You've earned this stillness, this quiet, this calm. Close your eyes now. Let the last of the incense drift away. Let your breath deepen, soften. Let the palace fade. You're safe here. You're home for now.